There was this fat raccoon prowling around the neighborhood. It was roughly the size of a car's tire and just as round. I'd see it sometimes if I got off late, usually just the green gleam of its eyes reflecting in my car's headlights. But occasionally its clunky body would dart out into the road right in front of my car. It really had no sense at all. The raccoon didn't pose a problem until it started getting in our trash. One morning I walked outside to see my driveway covered in garbage. My son was still in diapers, so the smell was terrible. Rotting food and his mushy brown waste coated the blue bin. My wife gagged as she came outside. "Something has to be done about that pesky raccoon," she said, and I agreed. One of my neighbors suggested spraying watered-down bleach on the trash bins to keep out the pest. But it didn't work. A few mornings later, I walked out to once again see the trash all over my driveway. I was pretty stressed at this point. My in-laws were coming to visit for the first time in years, and I didn't want to hear my wife's mother complain about the mess. I angrily picked up the trash, imagining smushing that fat raccoon like a hairy water balloon the next time he dared to race out in front of my car. Unfortunately, I never saw the little jerk lurking around my neighborhood. The night before my in-laws were due, I decided to let our dog, Lucy, sleep outside. It was summertime, and we lived out in the sticks, so this wasn't cruel. I only say this because I'm sure a few animal-loving city people who keep your poor dogs in metal crates and exercise them maybe once or twice a day are gonna flip out on me, but Lucy loved being outside. Like most of the dogs around here, we let her roam free. Lucy was usually at home, either lying on the porch or slipping into the doggy door to rest beside the AC on hot days. But when she felt like it, she had a whole mountain to explore. So that night, we shut the screen door and left Lucy out. I thought that her presence would be enough to deter the raccoon, but evidently our garbage was some gourmet crap. Lucy alerted us around 2 a.m. that the trespasser had returned. She growled gutturally, and then there was a loud yipping sound. I slipped on my house shoes and tentatively went out with my flashlight. I hoped that Lucy had killed the pest. As I approached, I thought this was the case. Lucy stood shaking her head back and forth as she did with her favorite chew toy, a furry mess of gray, black, and red crunched under the weight of her jaws. "Lucy," I called. "It's dead, girl." Her tail wagged as she turned towards me, lessening her grip on the critter. As she did so, I realized I'd made a mistake. The raccoon had indeed been limp, but it wasn't dead. It scratched Lucy across the face, biting her neck hard enough for her to yelp in pain. The creature landed on the wet ground with a loud thump and turned, hissing at me with its glistening white teeth. I shrunk back, but it ran at me. It was so tiny that I should have been able to kick it away to stop it, but my body froze. It sank its teeth into my raised wrist. Fortunately, before it could do further damage, Lucy caught it by the scruff of its neck and gave it another hard shake. This time, based on the crack of its neck, I knew the creature was not just playing dead. After that, I brought my dog inside, washing the blood from her fur. The raccoon had scratched her good, and one of her eyes had been hurt. I hoped it wasn't too serious. It was too early for the vet, but I took her at 8 a.m. as soon as they opened. What the vet said lightened my heart. Fortunately, it's just a surface abrasion. I'll write an antibiotic prescription for Lucy so it doesn't get infected. It's good that she's up to date on her rabies vaccination. Just call me if you need anything. I left feeling reassured, but had this nagging feeling that I forgot something important. This sensation continued to eat at me for several days, but now I realized what I'd done wrong. The raccoon had bitten me too. This morning, I couldn't force myself to drink a glass of water. I attended school in Pleasant Grove, Massachusetts. There was this weird urban myth that circulated amongst the students about a cat named Shadow. It said that the cat once belonged to Marnie Grover, the school's founder. It would follow her to school daily, basking in the sunlight outside her class window. By the time Marnie was in her last year of high school, Shadow was old. His bones ached, and arthritis made it hard for him to walk. Still, the cat would follow Marnie to school each day, diligently waiting outside her class until it was time for the pair to go home. One day, Marnie couldn't find her cat. "Shadow," she called, "where are you?" She was concerned when she didn't hear his soft meow in response. "Shadow, don't you want breakfast, boy?" She noisily opened up a can of tuna, expecting him to come running, as lively as a kitten. But still, there was no response. Marnie's mother noticed her daughter's distress and said, "I'll look for Shadow, dear. You go ahead and get to school." So Marnie started on her way to school. She kept thinking about her little cat, about his soft black fur and the pink pads of his feet. When had she last walked to school without him? Marnie wasn't sure she ever had. After all, Father had gotten Shadow for her 4th birthday. Marnie was so consumed by her worry that she didn't notice the sound of footsteps crunching through the snow behind her. She was being followed by Gene Pollard, a boy 2 grades below her, whom she had spurned 3 times. Marnie didn't realize he was there until she felt his harsh grip on her arm. "Marnie Grover," Gene smirked. "Fancy running into you out here." As usual, Marnie had taken the scenic route, trekking through the woods instead of fighting to get through the overcrowded streets. "What do you want, Gene?" Marnie asked, trying to jerk her arm away, but his grip was too tight. "I think you know," the boy said, jerking Marnie towards him. She raised her free fist, intending to punch her assailant, but he grabbed her hand before she could land a hit. "It's just you and me," he said. However, the sound of a snapping branch proved him wrong. He jumped and spun around to see Shadow sitting just a few yards in front of him, his black tail flicking back and forth. "Oh, it's just your stupid cat," Gene sneered, dragging Marnie towards it. He raised his foot. "How old is this thing anyway? It's always given me the creeps." "Shadow!" Marnie yelled. "Run!" But the cat didn't listen. Gene brought his heel down. Just before it made contact with her beloved cat's head, Marnie shut her eyes tightly. "No!" she sobbed as she heard a loud crunch. Marnie crumpled to the ground, not expecting she'd actually fall when Gene's tight grip still held her captive. She could feel his nails digging into the pale flesh of her wrist, but when she opened her eyes, Gene was no longer there. Marnie was all alone in the forest. She looked around, confused, and then saw something that terrified her. Like bracelets, Gene's decapitated hands still held her. Blood leaked from their ends in a copious stream. Marnie shrieked and shook them off. In the distance, she heard a meow. Shadow's meow. She felt sure her little cat had saved her from the Pollard boy. From that day on, the ghost of Shadow is said to roam the woods around Pleasant Grove. Some claim that if you walk the trail that Marnie did, he'll follow along after you. We were hunting out in the Appalachian Mountains when we first saw it. A wild boar. My girlfriend has an affinity for pigs. She thinks they're cute and pink, but I'm sure even she'd scream at the sight of this monster. It was as big as a large dog, and you could smell its musty stink from miles away. "Don't move," my uncle whispered as he tentatively raised his rifle. "They spook easy." He took a deep breath, adjusted his aim slightly, and fired. Bang! The shot went wide. He would later insist that it had nicked the beast's flank, but to me it looked like he missed completely. For some reason, the boar didn't flee. It just looked around with its shiny black eyes. The animal snorted, dragging one of its hooves across the ground, as if it were a bull about to charge. My uncle was reloading his gun, mumbling something under his breath about that goddamn piece of bacon, when he dropped the shells. They clattered against the ground, and the boar jerked its head in our direction. What happened next happened fast. The boar charged at us. Its tusks hadn't seemed so large from a distance. But as it closed in on my location, I remember thinking they were biological machetes. My uncle tried to pull me out of the way, but it was to no avail. All he succeeded in doing was preventing the enraged creature from goring my stomach. Instead of being disemboweled, those horrible tusks penetrated my leg, bursting through my clothes and flesh like a hot knife through butter. Thankfully, my uncle had finished loading his gun and shot it point blank through the eye before it could further harm me. To this day, the scar on my leg itches when I smell bacon frying.